How's everybody going? Welcoming you guys back to another edition of The Life Equation. And joining me on today's show for our topic of discussion today is Mr. Slysonic. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well, honestly. I've you know you reached out to me saying, "Hey, do you want to take part of this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? This seems really cool, and I'm glad you've asked me to join in on this, and I'm looking forward to it."
Yeah, no, thank you once again for coming on to the show. I'm really looking forward to having you on, and thank you very much for coming on. I think that you just have a very interesting perspective to give on today's topic, and that's kind of been the whole theme with a lot of guests. Is I've really just wanted to pick somebody who I thought like, hey, this person could give a really cool topic on this part of somebody's journey. I feel like this could be something really cool to kind of analyze and really go about. With that being said, however, today's topic of discussion was mainly going to center around happiness and general like fulfillment in life. The main question I wanted to pose was, do you think happiness is a choice? What's your initial impression of that question?
All right. Um, I guess the first thing is that we're gonna have a nice sit down about this. Obviously, this isn't something that can just be answered immediately, so we're here to yap all day about this, pretty much. Um, my initial impression of the question is, sometimes uh you don't get like that initial choice, you don't get the initial choice between happiness and misery, but what you can do is you can balance yourself so that you can adapt to your situations, you can do whatever you can to try and make yourself happy. So yeah, it's obviously a very complex question because you can't just choose between those two. But you have to do what you can to make the most out of
Yeah.
everything.
So you don't think that like it's a choice then at all? You think like obviously it's very hard to overcome if somebody is miserable?
It's less that it's not a choice and more so that you know you get dealt a hand for that, about with what life gives you, and with that hand you can decide what's the best thing to do. It's your choice to aim towards something rather than it's your choice to simply achieve happiness or simply achieve misery.
Yeah. I think it's
So
I think it's important to always have something to shoot for, like you were saying, and it's unfortunate that not everybody gets dealt the same hand. Like I come from a
mm,
very fortunate situation, and I'm just happy to be here and be able to talk to people. How would you say like your hand got dealt? Like, can you find a lot of happiness where you're at?
it's with my situation in particular, and this is a very interesting point of my life where, frankly, not much is really upbeat. Let's just say, but with that being said, I have a lot to deal with my own life, my own, I guess, vices, responsibilities, and just things that really do, at the end of the day, they do drag me down. And sometimes it's okay to just say, yeah, my life's a bit miserable, but at the same time, you can use that energy and just direct it towards, hey, I'm going to try and get better and I'm going to try and keep doing better.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that's kind of what I do. I think a lot of things in my life, they don't go particularly well, and obviously they lean a lot towards the misery part of that scale. Like you can like imagine like a scale of this. One end is happiness, one end is misery. With where a lot of my life things have put me, a lot of it is towards that miserable side. But I'm not gonna let that weigh me down. I'm just going to try and balance it out with whatever I can do and just adapt.
Yeah, and I feel like it's interesting because a lot of people I've talked to who are probably some of the more upbeat people I've met, who are some really positive people, they always kind of reflect that same point of, hey, like I kind of just have to shoot for the best, but there is a lot in my life that has gone wrong. Because every time I've seen you, every time I've spoken to you, I feel like you've been somebody who really brings a light to other people, so to speak. And I think it's great. Like I'm really happy to see that you do that, but it's just interesting that you always like you sort of do reflect on yourself and say like yeah there is still a lot that goes wrong, and I I think that's everybody. I think everybody definitely has a lot more that they can be miserable about. And it's tough too in today's society with social media, and we really only get to see like the great parts of
Mhm.
people's lives. But at the same time, it's great to focus more of your energy to shooting towards something positive, which I think is another thing that sort of branches off of this. You could you like refrain that point one more time and sort of elaborate on that? Because you mentioned you have the option to shoot your energy towards something positive. Like you can choose to just like sort of focus on the negative aspect, or you can either aim towards something positive. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, no. So I mean, for a while, I've had depression, I've had anxiety, and so and such, and there are obviously like down moments I have where I'm like, man, everything kind of sucks, and I can spend all my time, like I can spend all my time right now just saying, yeah, here's everything wrong in my life and why it's kind of hard to get through everything, but you can do that, but the other option is you can say, "Yeah, no, I'm working to improve my life, and I am. I'm applying for a lot of jobs. I've been just hanging out, having a good time with friends, making sure my family is still well, and just making the most of what I can. And rather than just staying in the miserable downward slope, I might as well try and stop myself from doing that by just going up.
What kind of jobs are you applying for?
Well, honestly, a lot of the really basic jobs, I've just gone kind of unlucky in that end. So I've been looking for a lot of obviously admin and computer work because that's where what my interest is. I've also been applying for like just standard retail jobs. I have actually worked a retail job before, which I'll be honest, that was not a great moment of my life. But I apply to a lot of different jobs, and it's something that I want to focus on making myself more happy rather than just sort of taking any odd job and just not enjoying it.
Yeah.
So
It's
you know,
tough when having a job is just a part of your life, though. That's something that everybody kind of has to accept is that you, at some point in your life or another, just have to be this sort of cog in the machine. And it's really difficult to follow what you were saying earlier about I can choose to aim my energy towards a more positive side of myself or I cannot when you're applying for something that, like you said, might just be sort of dead end or not really where you want to be. But at the same time, I feel like you can't really get to that next level of I really want to appreciate my life now or I can appreciate my life without having
mm,
something like that that sucks. Do you feel that? Like, does that make sense with what I'm getting at?
yeah, no, like I do think that I do think that there are going to be downs in your life. Like I feel like no matter what, every single person, like I've had this realization fairly recently, as in like the last couple years, I suppose, that every person you cross through the street and like someone you just see at random, every single person has had, their vices, every single person has had, their down moments. They've experienced a life, and I like to think of it this way. They've experienced a life that's probably like 100 times worse than yours, but they're still kicking about. You're
Yeah.
seeing them like at the park or something. They're just enjoying their time, relaxing in the park. They're just going about grocery shopping. Like that person's probably experienced 100 times worse than you, but you, they're still kicking about, and they're still, they seem like they're enjoying their life or at least going through it. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a interesting change of mind frame that I suppose I've had over the past few years. Like, wow, this person's probably been through so much worse than I have,
Yeah,
but
well,
they're still
not
around
not
here.
that it's ever a contest because like you were getting at,
Yeah.
every person's life sucks at one point or another and everybody has their struggles. And something that might have really sucked for somebody else might be something that somebody else can get over. If somebody has a really poor relationship with their parents and they get screamed at a lot of it, like maybe they just have a easier time coping with it just because they've had to deal with it for a long time or something like that. I remember there was a
Mm,
point when I would just go out and I would sometimes pause, like you were saying, and I would look at somebody who what's a good example of this actually? I was at an airport going back from like New Jersey to Detroit. And I remember seeing this girl, she had all these weird tattoos. She wore these very baggy clothes, and she just looked really down and sad. And I couldn't help but just peer back at her every now and then as I was walking away. And I thought to myself, what has she actually been through in her life? What does she actually do on a day to day basis? What encouraged her to make that decision? And is she trying to follow what you're saying, just shoot for somewhere or have some goal? Or is it really just like she doesn't see the world like that? Because that's the unfortunate thing. Do you know of anybody who just like doesn't do that, like who doesn't seem to have any forward direction?
Mm, I can think of a couple people, like a couple people very close to me. Yeah, I've had a bunch of friends that feel like that. My mother kind of feels that way as well.
Really? Oh
Yeah,
gosh.
it is like a very rough direction in a lot of people's lives, and sometimes I feel like I myself like exhaust myself just trying to make sure everyone's doing okay. I'm obviously more than happy to lend a hand and do what I can to be the most helpful, the most helpful child, the most helpful friend, the most helpful person in that scenario, and I do my best to keep spirits up, if that makes sense.
Have you ever at a point where you've kind of had to just back off? Like there's no saving the sinking ship and someone just is in a really bad state?
Oh, I, I've I've definitely had like it's definitely gone to that point, but the thing with me, particularly, is that I'm like really insistent on you know doing what I can, like making sure I do absolutely everything before I just you know give up, because that just doesn't. It's just not the right option in my mind.
Mm-mm.
It's like I exhaust myself like at times, but I want to do my I just want to do my best to make sure people are okay and people around me are fine.
You exhaust yourself because there's a lot it's really hard to see somebody like that and just let it go, especially if it's a close friend or like you said, your mother, because you want to always be proactive. At least that's the way I am. I think for a lot of my life I've been very conscientious. I've always tried to care a lot more about other people, and it sounds narcissistic and I'm definitely not perfect with it. There's still a lot that I have wrong with myself. But you just in general I feel like that's human nature, right? You just hate seeing people down. You don't want that to happen,
Mm.
but sometimes it's just like unavoidable.
Yeah, yeah, no, like it, it it's just kind of in my nature to help out as much as I can, and I'll be honest, I do think I help out maybe too much, i.e., I might be a bit too intrusive at times. Like if someone wants a bit of space, then it's kind of hard for me to give them that space. Like obviously I try and respect that, but as soon as like if they say give me an hour, as soon as it hits like 59 minutes and 59 seconds, I'll be in their DMs like, hey, are you all right?
It sounds like
um
very strange out of context for people who don't know what Discord is.
yeah, no, yeah, just sort of obviously a lot of people message me on Discord, or in the case of my mother, I just sort of leave the room for a bit and stay in my room, or I stick with her if she needs it, and try and help out as much as I can, because different things are quite hard for different people. So
Mhm.
I do what I can.
Why do you think it's hard, going off of what you said about helping people and reaching out, why do you think it's hard for some people to be like that? Why do you think it's hard for some people to be conscientious or reach out? Is it situation based? Like if somebody seems to be in a really bad mood, you don't want to try and cut in on that?
Yeah, like I think there is a point where you can sort of ask someone. You might be stepping on someone's toes when they might just need a bit of time to themselves. So it is hard to make that choice. Like I actually have a great example. Ironically, yesterday I was actually in a call with some of my friends, and we were together, and one of them just seemed kind of down and just really out of focus. So after we stopped our call together, I reached out to them personally saying, "Hey, are you all right? I did notice that you did seem kind of out of it at times. And, just are you all right? And how's it going?" And just kept them company if they needed it. And then the thing with me is that sometimes I get a bit paranoid whenever I say that, so I just also say, if you don't want me, if you don't want me to just snoop around, then you can also just say, yeah, you're fine on your own.
Yeah. Well, it's also somebody might just be irritable at some point when they say, "Hey, I really just need my
Mm,
space," like you were saying. And I feel like that's one thing that people overlook is it sounds everything we were saying right now, to a degree, it sounds cheesy about like, "Oh, hey, just reach out to your friends." But once you get to a certain point in life, I feel like it's just true, and you kind of start to realize that, wow, like maybe this stuff gets said a lot, but it gets said a lot for a reason. In fact, I remember just there was oh gosh, where was I going at here? I had a situation in college where one of my friends was very much like that. He was a very open guy. I talked to him all the time. I still talk to him today. But he had one day where he was just you can tell he was very clearly out of it. I wanted to make sure he was doing all right. And he even texted me back later. He talked to me and he said, "Hey, listen, I didn't mean to be a complete jerk earlier. I'm sorry I really just like shut my door and I'm sorry I if I seemed closed off." So it is nice when stuff like that happens, when they are sort of reciprocal of the way you feel, when you try to reach out and say, "Hey, are you okay? Are you actually doing all right?" But yeah, it's just it's a whole scenario.
yeah, it is definitely like a case by case thing. So sometimes people might not receive well to that, but sometimes people do need that ear by their side,
Mm,
and I do my best to be that ear. I listen out. I'm like, hey, if you want to talk, I can talk about anything really. Whether that's talking about your situation or just needing a distraction, then I'm willing to help out.
yeah. So when you say needing a distraction, do you mean just say helping somebody be distracted from how they might be feeling, just trying to bring them away from whatever's bringing them down?
Yeah, yeah, like whenever someone's down, I try and go between like one of three paths roughly. Either we talk about the situation that the person might be in, how they're feeling towards all that. And the other option is give them a bit of space if they need it, and then maybe they'll talk later. And then the third option for me, which I find to be it's a pretty good situation at like certain situations and certain times where sometimes they just want to be distracted from like what's keeping them down. It could be that they had a really bad work day and they don't want to think about it at all. Then you can just be like, hey, let's talk about like video games or something. And like, you know, uh, have you seen like the latest TV show, or have you checked out that new YouTube video? It's pretty cool. Like, just something to like just get your mind off it and get your mind going with something a lot more positive than your bad work day, or
Yeah.
a really rough situation.
It seems strange that you like you were saying, we have video games and we have all this media, this Netflix show, like all these
Hmm.
shows and mediums. We have all these things in the world, and yet somehow we are still the most depressed generation of all time. Especially when you can just reach out to somebody like this and you can talk to them over Discord call, or you can have more like online communication. If you were imagine being in the 80s and then you go away to college somewhere and then your parents like you have to go dig out their phone number on a landline and go call that up, and you have to somehow make sure like, okay, I'm in a time frame where they're here. How so it's just interesting, the whole psychological debate about how that works out. I think I would like to say some of it's based on like the way different cultures are, but you and in fact, I actually kind of want to inquire about that, since that's one thing that separates us a bit. Is you're from the UK, and I heard you saying earlier
Mhm.
that, yeah, like the UK had its differences. What do you think that the UK does differently than America? And do you think it's any happier? Do you think it's any easier to talk to one or the other?
It's a bit of a tricky one, but I think like me from the UK, it's really easy to get in contact with basically anyone in my family and a lot of my friends if I have their phone number. It's just more or less just hit up their social media or message them on WhatsApp, which is extremely popular in the UK. Like pretty much every single person I know in this country has WhatsApp, so you can just very easily contact them, and it's just pretty much just a messaging service more or less that everyone has, and that it's reliable and dependent. So
You
you're
think
you're able to talk to people like that very easily.
people more so just have that not for the security, but for the actual communication aspect?
Yeah, yeah, it's like extremely convenient. And then through that you can just organize. Hey, would you be down to see me at so and so place at so and so time? And then you can just continue off from there if you need like the physical support. The physical support is a really important aspect, and to be honest, it is one that is pretty looked over in like the modern day and age. Because we have all this social media, we think what, it's good enough to just message people and that's about it. But there's a big difference between messaging someone on a social media and just talking to them in real life,
Oh,
and
absolutely. I mean, this is something
having
that
that physical contact.
yeah, and that's why you don't just talk to a lot of people you've met on Discord. Like you actually go out to a lot of events. I've seen you at a lot of the different marathon settings and people you've talked to, and I think that's really valuable. I think it's very easy to get caught up in, oh, hey, this is my online friend group, but that doesn't replace actual human connection. I think that's something that we really struggle with nowadays is that people are trying to replace that with just purely online communication. And then you
Yeah.
step back and think about it and you realize, oh, hey, Reddit people or a bunch of random people you might have met in, I don't know, a Fortnite Discord. And you meet a lot of good people online. I'm not saying you don't, because
Mm.
90% of the people behind those accounts are actual human beings who mean well. That's something that a lot of people who don't use this technology very often realize. And yeah, there's a lot of like really poor examples of people being scammers or people taking advantage of people and all of that. But do you do you still feel that, like, it's mostly good? Have you ever had a negative experience with somebody you met online than you met in person?
um, I haven't really had that, aside from I guess my own personal conflict. Like a lot of the time, I think about people I've met through a real life event. Like obviously we've communicated through Discord a little bit, or like I've seen their like Twitch stream or whatever, but actually physically meeting them is like a whole different experience. Like you get to that's pretty much how I met a bunch of my closest friends in the world. Just through IRL, an IRL event. And I haven't really had like any sort of negative experience going from IRL to just online chatting. And every now and then it's like, oh yeah, I can't wait to see you next year, or I can't wait to see you at the next event.
Uh,
It's like we very much value that physical time we have together. Like online is great and all, like that's a great way to keep in contact, but it just doesn't beat physically being there and hanging out with your friends.
Yeah. Now, I think this is it's honestly really reflective of the actual topic of the episode, just being the the idea of like happiness being this choice. You're somebody who, when you take that initiative to go out and talk to somebody who you've seen around in a Discord call or something, and then you actually say, hey, like this would be great, or you actually straight up introduce yourself at one of those live events. I feel like it really does. It would seem at the very least to me like it's been a big improvement on your life. And you said that still a vast majority of people that you've met online have been your closest friends?
Yeah, yeah. Like I've met a lot of people at my very first event, which is ESA Summer 22. A whole bunch of people. I was very nervous about being there because I was going to be my first IRL event, and the first time meeting a lot of people that I've only known by name for several years. And it's just kind of like, oh, do they know who I am? Like, do they know what I do? Um,
Was it ever
like
awkward? Like, did you ever have trouble starting up that conversation?
Funnily enough, no, absolutely not. Because you have to also realize there are the person you're talking to is also experiencing the same thing. So if you take that initiative to be, very welcoming and very open, having like very open arms towards, meeting people and just not being embarrassed, being like, who are you again? Or like looking at their name badge. If you just take that initiative, then it feels good. Like it feels good to you. It feels good to the other person. Being like, hey, this person's very willing to just say hey to me, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah. All of that, being able to actually talk to somebody and just really get to know them and breaking down that barrier of awkwardness you said, which I'm glad it didn't exist for you. When I went to college, it definitely existed, especially oh gosh, this is another reason why I'm glad we're talking about this. I went to college right when COVID started, and this is
Mhm.
it's funny how like years later, I feel like people have still been talking about this, how when you get to college, everybody's in the same situation. And now it's arguably even closer to what we're talking about now because it's not like most people are from a local area. I guess a lot of them would still be from a local area in college, but now they're more widespread. Now I feel like it's a lot easier for somebody in the state of New Jersey to go to a university in California or somebody from, I don't know, Finland to go to a university in the United Kingdom and so on and so forth. I think it really makes it a lot harder, at least generally, to communicate with people. And going back to what I said about COVID, when I got to college, it was so awkward at first getting to know people, just having to walk up to somebody from, who lived 10 and a half hours away from me when you're not supposed to be anywhere near close to some people. I feel like it really like messed with a lot of people, especially that's how I found this community, funny enough, was I started getting into the community when COVID just started hitting. And it makes me really wonder how things would work if I met somebody from that era. And did you meet a lot of people from COVID as well, or were you like in the community way before COVID?
I started in the speedrun community in around 2018, so just before, or not just before, but a while before COVID hit. But when COVID did hit, the communities I were in all of a sudden were just overflowing with a whole bunch of new people and a bunch of people who are interested in, it starts off being interested in speedrunning and then it develops into being part of a community. That's that's kind of like I was very happy to like welcome people into the community and be like, hey, um, welcome to the community. If you need anything, there's going to be hundreds of people here to help you. So, or like dozens of people, hundreds of people, and we're all going to be willing to help you get going and support you. And if you decide to live stream, we'll check it out and support you.
And would you say
So
that's been the most important part the most important part of it for you is just getting that base of support? Do you think that you would really do I talked this a little bit with Geek last time when we were talking, but do you think you would still be streaming and still trying to do what you do even if there weren't like a lot of community members supporting you?
probably not, honestly. Like part of what makes, streaming fun or speedrunning fun is at the end of the day the community. Like I remember a while ago, like 2 or 3 years ago, there was someone on Twitter who was, asking about uh or who was writing, I believe, a thesis about speedrunning. And he wanted to get in contact with a bunch of speedrunners, so I got in contact with them. We had a lovely conversation. They asked me a bunch of questions about, what are the important aspects of speedrunning, what keeps you going, all this. And I honestly just said, speedrunning is pretty okay, it's pretty fun, but being part of a community is really, really valuable to me.
Now, what would you say to somebody who looks down on that? What would you say to somebody like, "Hey, here's a reason to join one of these communities," or "Here's a reason not to look down on it"? Do you think it relates kind of back to this, like, "Hey, it makes me happy"?
Yeah, I think so. Like at the end of the day, being part of a community, and I suppose my quote unquote definitive answer to, whether or not you want to be happy or miserable, it ties to, the connections around you, the people you connect with, the people you become friends with, you know, your own even your own like family members. If you have a good healthy relationship with them, then you're probably going to be happy, because then it just that sign of human contact is just, it feels very really really nice, and it keeps you together and it keeps you going. At least it does for me. Obviously a bunch of people have a different take on whether or not that's the answer to being happy, because obviously people have different opinions on this. But for me myself, a lot of it comes down to like the friends I have and the communities I'm part of, and the people around me. That's like a very big part towards my happiness, and
Mhm.
I value that human contact, a lot.
Yeah. I'm beginning to think that no matter who you are or where you are, I think you have to have some interaction with somebody. And I might be wrong on this because I felt really lonely when I came down here. I've done two really long moves. Like when I was in college, I was 10 hours away from my home. And then when I was now in my adult life, I'm 12 hours away from home. It's very important to actually put yourself out there, whether it's a Discord community or whether it's just meeting up with somebody for coffee or meeting somebody else in your apartment complex or on your street or wherever it may be. I feel like that what you're saying, the human aspect of it is something that's really valuable. And it's ironic that we're talking about this when we're, on an online forum and online chat rooms. But I feel like if you're just alone all the time, unless you were the most not even textbook introvert. Unless you're like an absolute like there's a completely different flip switch in your brain, zero social battery. You need that at some point. I feel like it's a basic part of human interaction that like you need to be happy. You need to actually have some base of support to be happy, I should say. And so I think that's something that a lot of people could do with because I like you've said, I know a lot of people in different Discord chat forums and online mediums. I think there are a lot of great people. I also think there are some people that could really do with putting themselves out there, just taking a risk, like, hey, maybe go ask who your neighbor is, or just go to one of those like events at your apartment complex or something that you may
Hmm.
not have originally done. I feel like going back to this point of taking initiative and really just getting involved with someone, I feel like getting involved with the community, getting involved with that base of support. I feel like that is almost feeding back into this topic of that's the choice you can make. You can choose to try and be a part of something or you cannot. And I think that personally I would think that the social interaction aspect of it is mandatory. Have you met anybody who like is just a complete introvert who if they never met a single soul in their entire life they could be happy or do you think that's just insane?
Hmm. I do think like there's a whole bunch of philosophical theories, I suppose, or like theses written about it, or a lot of, what's the word I'm blanking out. Uh,
Hypotheses?
yeah, yeah, like psychological things, and there's a lot of stuff on that in the world, and a lot of it does sort of back down to sort of the hierarchy of needs. I think it's by a fellow named Maslow. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where it's a pyramid, and at the bottom of the pyramid, which are like your absolute essentials, are
Actually,
food,
I
water,
I think I've
shelter,
seen a
space.
sorry, I've seen a picture of what you're talking about. It's like at the very top is like or maybe not at the very top, but it's like your spiritual needs, your physical needs, your safety needs, and then like at the most pinnacle, it's like you need your very basic human rights like safety and like you have to have the right to
Mm,
exist, that kind of thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like at the very bottom is like food, water, shelter, space, security, all that. And just very slightly above it is the social aspect, your social needs, uh your psychological needs. That's like towards the bottom of the pyramid, because it's so, I suppose, necessary for you. Like it's part of your needs. And then going up is sort of like, holding physical value in things. Like, I suppose if you own a Lamborghini, that would be somewhere among the top of the needs, because there is no need for that.
I would hope not.
But yeah. But yeah, towards the very bottom, some of the strongest things you could ever need, like beyond physical survival, is part of it is just social interaction. And that's sort of how strong it is and how necessary it is for you to, keep up a good social life. I really don't think that there's not really anyone in the world that, I would know of where they're completely deprived from that social need, because factually from birth, you already have your mother and your father, Things can happen down the line, but they will like you will be like taken care of by someone at least. Like you're not going to be left out there to starve. Someone is going to help you, and you know that is a social that is a social need met. It's just having someone there.
I feel like yeah, there's no scenario I can really think of or cook up. Like I can't imagine anyone's path or anyone's journey in life that doesn't involve interacting with somebody, even if it's not your parents, because some people unfortunately are really unlucky. Maybe they don't talk to their parents a whole lot. Maybe they don't even know their parents because some people are orphans. And you still have a lot of people that but they still all have friends. Like they still talk to people. They still go places. So unless you are from some tortuous walk where every single person you have met outside of yourself just absolutely sucks, then like but even then that sounds like the more I say that, the more it just sounds like some Orwellian like dystopian novel. Can you imagine that? Like you're just in a scenario where from the day you're born, every single person you've met is just a complete like jerk off to
Yeah.
you and you that would be such a horrible existence. Like I can't even imagine that's like theoretically possible.
I think you're kind of bang on the money. It seems like absurd. Like that's like almost Orwellian kind of absurd, It's that's something that like, a fiction author would write to like start off a like a villain's plot line or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's in a way that's sort of, and I say Orwellian, I'm a big fan of George Orwell, but in a way that is
Mm.
sort of ingrained into like 1984, because the main character, Winston, the situation he's in, most of his interaction is from a screen, and then any of the actual conversations, like, and even then when he's looking at screens, it's not like he's talking to somebody, it's either an announcement or he's in some weird like gym class. Then when he goes to lunch, there's this guy who's like talking about how great it is that words are going out of style and that conversations will be limited to like 6 words. And that's why it's miserable though, is because
Mm.
that world is set in a place where human interaction in of itself, virtual or otherwise, is just completely dissipated. And so people have their own opinions of George Orwell as a person. Obviously, guy was like a devout socialist, but I think he just that's another reason why he is still talked about today, like regardless or even past his just like dystopian take. But that bit right there is you can't take away the human element of it. And I feel like having the genuine interaction is something that he sort of implicitly emphasized because then sure enough when he goes out and he meets oh, what's her name? Julia. Julia is his love interest. Then his life becomes a lot better. Like he has someone to talk to. He actually starts thinking for himself. And like even though they're on the run essentially, even though they're these outlaws in a horrific world, like it's so much better because they have each other and like they can actually have some interaction. So
Yeah.
mhm.
No, I agree that like, I agree on the fact that it's just something you kind of need. It very much boosts your life. If you are somehow like starved from, social interaction or, having a sense of belonging, if you are somehow starved from that and then all of a sudden you have someone there for you, then yeah, it would obviously be a have a positive effect on your life. It might be overwhelming in a situation like that specifically, but that social aspect is very important and you realize how long you've gone without it.
Yeah. I think and that's another thing too is realizing how long you've gone without it and then when you finally get back to it, you kind of understand the power of it. In fact, one of my buddies who I plan on having on this show in a couple of weeks, he's in the middle of cooking up his own story right now. He wants to develop a game for it one day. And the overall theme about it, I can't spill too many details about the actual story itself, but the overall theme of it is that if you have any sort of like if you have the right base of support, then any sort of addiction or any sort of problem you have can be overcome, which I think is a really powerful message based on what you were talking about with the friends and with just checking in on somebody and making sure, hey, are you okay? Is everything all right? Can I help you with anything? I think understanding that other people, like everybody, when they have a problem, when you have something that goes on in your mind that tick, or when you do feel really lonely or really depressed, and as somebody who's, I had a little bit of that when I got down here. Like when I first got down here, I was just so down in the dumps. And I think a big part of that though was because I didn't know anybody. And then sure enough, after you start meeting people or after you start having more positive interactions, you start spending less and less time wallowing in your own misery and you realize, hey, I actually have a lot to look forward to in this scenario. Like this is really great. And so that's kind of why honestly I wanted to make the theme of this show specifically like do you think happiness is a choice? And I think this has honestly been a really natural progression of the conversation because social interaction based on what we're talking about sort of just fits right in. And like if you make the decision to go out and to gain that base of support, it's incredible. I think it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. It, um, I guess also sort of branching off a little bit. At my very first physical event, which was ESA Summer 22, I that earlier that year I was absolutely at my lowest. I was completely miserable. I was ready to do some very permanent things, let's just say, that year. And it I was lost for a while. I was like, I'll attend this event and see just what happens. It would be cool to at least experience a speedrun event, and it started off as being excited for the event, and then the event happened, and I came out of it thinking, wow, I can't believe I've gone my life without you know with all these friends. Like I've just gone out of that event and I've made like a couple dozen friends from this, and I still talk to a lot of them this day, and we still and then I start to realize, wow, I should do this stuff more often. So I keep going to smaller events, bigger events, and I just it's really it's really invaluable that um that social interaction. It's that's what keeps me going to a lot of these events. That's what keeps me going in my life in general. And I'm very glad that I've had that opportunity to just be part of a community and meet a lot of people. And that's been like one of the biggest opportunities of my life.
For what it's worth, I would consider myself very lucky to have known you. I think that you're a very interesting person in of yourself, and I think when everywhere you go, this is another point that I was harking on, is that everywhere you go, regardless of what you perceive in your mind and what you were considering doing, and for the record, once again, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we're having this conversation. But you are like one of the most positive people I think I've seen. Everywhere you go, you're just like such a like you laugh a lot, and you make people laugh, and I think it's important that you're around. I think you're the kind of guy that somebody online or in person where you are in the UK, there are a good portion of people in the world that have met you and been like, wow, I can't believe I went my whole life without knowing this guy. In a way, I think some people might say that about me. I don't like to say it that way because I don't want to sound super narcissistic.
Mm.
But I've had a bunch of people tell me, you in fact have told me this multiple times that like I might just be like this extraordinary person. Sometimes I don't see it, but I'm very glad to at least like have that kind of impact on somebody's life in the same way that all these friends that you're talking about, all these people you meet are positive impacts. I'm happy that you can be a positive impact and that I can be a positive impact, that I can tell my friends as well that, hey, you guys are people I couldn't live without. Because I think that's another part of the social interaction is when you hear that, how can you ever let somebody down? Like, how can you ever be like, hey, listen, I don't want to wallow. I don't want to be miserable because the guy who's positive, the guy who actually thinks all these great thoughts, the guy who wants to do something in his life, that's the guy that people want to see. That's the guy that I want to see. Like, you don't have time to be miserable in that sense.
Yeah, no, like I guess in a way it does kind of, cover up. So for example, your misery, like whether that's a good or bad thing, I would actually say that's up for debate if that's a good or bad thing if you're just covering up your misery. But what you also have to realize is I've made the point earlier in this talk as well that, every single person you meet has gone through so much in their life, and I I just have this mind frame that every person I bump into probably has a much more miserable life than me, but they're still positive. They're still having a great time. And I think that about myself a lot. Like, I've gone through so much in my life, and I could go on and on about how my life's just been kind of miserable lately. But instead, I'm here just saying, hey, I'm pretty happy. I just want to keep positive, and I hope to spread that. I hope
Mhm.
to spread that positivity.
Yeah. It's important to find ways to stay positive when, as you said, you're covering up your misery. Now, when you say covering up your misery, do you mean like under the surface you're still miserable and you're just trying to be happy? Or like when you say covering it up, you mean like, oh, I know I'm miserable, and then you go home and that's why you play video games, or that's why you do other things that maybe you're not proud of, or something like that? Like the former or the latter, the distinction?
It's kind of a that's kind of a tough one. It does obviously depend on the person. Both are pretty applicable in their own ways. Like if you're covering something up, like i.e. you're pretty miserable on under the surface, but right now you're doing fine. I think there are good and bad. There's good and bad to that. You can, for example, if there's like an active problem that you need to deal with, then obviously covering that up is not going to do great. You are going to have to deal with that situation one way or another. But for now, if keeping you happy is what keeps you going, then yeah, keep happy. And just as long as you sort of acknowledge that, maybe down the line you will have to deal with this, just keep like a positive mind frame intact. Like, as long as, the majority of your thoughts are positive, like even if it's like 51% of your thoughts are positive and 49 of them are negative, then at least you have a more positive mind frame towards, when you started this thing, which you have to do when you had 80% miserable thoughts and 20% good thoughts. It's just try and keep the majority of your thoughts positive in a positive mind frame. That's easier said than done, obviously. But I don't know. I do think a positive mind frame does wonders for dealing with a hard, challenging task like that.
It depends a lot, like you said, on the situation. Like, obviously, it's easier for us to say, "Oh yeah, be positive." When even though we've both like had struggles, and everybody in the world has had their struggles, there are some scenarios where I feel like this conversation just isn't even applicable. As crazy as that is to say, I remember
Yeah.
watching a bunch of. I've watched a bunch of in-depth documentaries about the world that some of my buddies sent me, and one of the most terrifying ones, quite frankly, I've seen. I can't even remember what it's called at the moment. I might have to post this in Discord later, but basically the documentary is talking about China persecuting Muslim minorities and how they're basically like taking people and rehabilitating them in what I would like to say are a step away from concentration camps. Like if you're in the bathroom for more than five
Mm.
minutes, they literally shock you and they try to like completely strip away your identity. Like those people are in an absolutely craptastic scenario. That is utterly horrific, and especially if everybody else is being told and being like strictly prohibited from trying to be positive, this isn't even applicable, which is scary to say the least. Like that's absolutely terrifying. I would highly recommend you guys look that kind of thing up and like educate yourselves if you haven't. But back to what you were saying just about the general case of like, hey, you've got to kind of try and carry yourself with more positive thoughts. I feel like there's unfortunately two sides to that where it is good to, like you said, think more positively and to have a lot more good thoughts than bad thoughts. The problem is if you still realize the problem is there and you're just carrying that along with you, it's like you said, that problem is going to rise again eventually. So, do like how long do you try to keep it stuffed down for before you realize, hey, this is a problem, or before something happens that just makes it a problem? In fact, I think I've talked about this on and off with like Cinder and probably Geek as well, but you can't just like stuff down a negative emotion forever because
Yeah.
otherwise like it's always going to be sitting there is the problem. And I like to picture it like a stick of dynamite that you just have sticking out of your pocket. Like okay, it's not going to blow you up now, but then heaven forbid you like scrape your hip on the side of a wall or like some flint pops up and then boom, the entire thing explodes. If that makes sense. Like you either take the thing out, throw it out, and then try to blow it up instantly, or it's just going to sit there and then eventually, one way or the other, it's going to have to be dealt with.
Yeah. No, I think that's a pretty good example. Like, doing something in like a state of panic or like a state of just, a negative mind frame. It would be obviously a lot better to see if you can deal with it later when you're in a more positive mind frame. Like if your job has given you something like a rough task to do and you're not in the headspace to do a very rough task like that, just try and see if you can, like, say, hey, can I get this done by so and so date, and build up your mind frame, be ready for it. Obviously, you're not going to be able to, avoid it, but you can at least keep yourself ready to for that to just, you can at least make yourself ready to challenge that with a more positive mindset, saying, hey, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to do it well.
Yeah,
It's yeah, it's just your mind frame.
yeah. People struggle with that in a lot of scenarios where they might feel like there's just no point in being happy. If you're I was in a scenario, in fact, this is kind of how I was for the first few weeks I was here. I just utterly despised my job. I really didn't like it. But then I came to a point talking to a bunch of people and talking to people who have way more life experience than me. Ironic given the title of the podcast. But they've all just told me, listen, at some point or another, if you just work hard and you trust the process, things are going to get better. And it doesn't seem like it now because you're 23 years old. I'm 23. And it's hard for you to go see a future when it seems like you're not in the scenario you want to be in. But also, just like you said, trying to deal with emotions like that when you're in a better headspace, which was something I needed to worry about first and something that I would recommend a lot of other people do. If you're listening to a conversation like this right now and you're sort of just sighing and shrugging it off, I would encourage you to just worry more about like, okay, where am I at as a person? Because the way I've always seen it is that if you're in a how do I put this to a metaphor? The way I always like to describe it is if you have a brick wall in front of you, don't keep bashing your head into the brick wall until you break through it, even if your goal is to get over the brick wall, because you might eventually get through it, but all that's going to end up happening is you're finally going to get over the hump, and it's not going to feel like an accomplishment. It's going to feel like you just destroyed your skull because you bashed it into a brick wall. The better way to do it is you back up, take a few minutes, and then once you're ready to go back at it again, that's like a better way to go about it. In fact, I think like that's pretty much a major reason why people get burnt out is just because of all the stress and from digging away at something like that a whole bunch. So I going back to what you said though, I just think that is something that really is valuable is where are you at right now and how do I overcome a negative mindset even when it doesn't seem possible?
Yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. Like having a just having a more positive mind frame does help a lot. Like you said, you're not going to you might make it through if you keep bashing your head at that wall, but what would be better is just coming back with a more positive mind frame and seeing if you can, scale the wall if you're feeling up for it.
Mhm.
It is just like, it just boils down to just a change of mind frame sometimes, and sometimes that is just impossible on a day. Like it's just completely impossible to change your mind frame. But what you can remind yourself is, okay, I'm not feeling great today, so it's probably going to suck today, but I'm going to feel a different way tomorrow. Is that different way going to be better? Is it going to be worse? Hopefully it's better. It might be worse, but it can't be much worse than saying, I can't do this. It can't be much worse than that. Um, so you can bit by bit make sure you have a more positive mind frame on this kind of thing. Like just just bit by bit, you know, how do you feel about this? Still not great, but I am a little bit better compared to how I was yesterday, where I felt like, yeah, I can't do this. And the next day you might be feeling better than that and better than that, and maybe another day you're feeling actually worse than that, but the next day you're feeling even better. It's just all about building up that mind frame.
And
And
is that kind of how you got out of the mind frame you were in, just apart from meeting people, but you sort of took it day by day?
yeah, like I think a lot of what got me through a lot of sad times, and especially in recent times, what got me through a lot of sad times is that um I just said, hey, right now I'm not feeling good. This even happened to me literally last night, where last night I was very, very down, and I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna try and get to bed. Tomorrow's a different day, and lo and behold, tomorrow comes, which is today, and I feel a lot better, and I feel pretty ready to go with a bunch of things. So bit by bit, day by day, you feel different. If it doesn't feel like it's getting much better today, just try and make sure you can sleep it off. Um, Maybe it'll be better the next day.
And sleep especially just having that sort of recharge time or using rest is just so vitally important, especially when it comes to being in a foul mood. Because you're definitely right. Sometimes just trying to beat away at it, or sometimes just staring at an issue and trying to analyze what the problem is, you just can't do it. Like the answer is not going to come to you instantaneously as much as a lot of people nowadays would expect with us having access to so much stuff instantly and with us just expecting a lot of things to get better. It's difficult when you don't have the solution immediately, but one thing that I've been told a lot is that in a sense is life. Is if you can overcome something like that, if you can overcome one of those biggest issues, maybe in like 10 years time you won't be in the scenario that you had once dreamed of, and maybe that's just life. But you can look back on a lot of the challenges you overcame and said like, "Hey, I could be in an absolutely terrible scenario given where my mindset was here." And then if you're able to take that journey and look where you are, I feel like that could be great. And going back to you as an example with your mindset of, I want to do permanent things and I want to, I don't know where I'm going to go. I feel like that's inspirational. I feel like that's something that a lot of people could take from.
Yeah, I yeah, that year as a whole, honestly, that year as a whole was incredible. I call it the best year of my life, even though very ironically, at the very start of the year, I was ready to just, yeah, you know.
Mhm.
I was ready to do said permanent things, but that year became better. Like month by month, it got better. I had, I attended my very first event, and that made me feel over the moon, pretty much. And from there, it just kept going up somehow, which I that year is probably one of the most inspirational tales of my life, I suppose, where I started the year at completely rock bottom. Like I could like look over some of my old messages with friends I talked to at the time, and I do actually do that. Like I do reflect a lot. Like wow, I really was that low at that time, and having and looking back at it now with this positive mind frame, I can say, wow, I'm glad I'm still here, and I'm doing myself proud. I'm doing everyone I know proud. I'm doing myself proud just by being here. And yeah, like if I ever have like any sort of memoir of my life written or whatever, then I want 2022 to be like the biggest year, the biggest tale of my life, because that was a year where things were just everything that could complete 180 started off as the worst year of my life became the best year of my life.
I feel like it's so rewarding too, the fact that you can pinpoint that moment. I remember asking Gayhis in the last episode, "Hey, do you remember a point where like streaming took off where you felt like this was really worth doing?" And he couldn't label an exact date. He can only give like a month. But being able to sort of being especially being able to look back, like you said, on some of your old messages and some of the things you said, some of the things you've thought, being able to say, "Wow, I was in a different mindset." I don't want to say it's funny because obviously it's a very serious issue that
Hmm.
you're getting at, but I can honestly relate to it. Like I journal pretty frequently. And looking back on some of the things I journaled about a couple of weeks ago today, when I feel like I'm in a much better scenario, I just saw my parents, I talked to them about some of the ways I was feeling. I look back on some of those messages and was like, yeah, I really don't want that guy to make any more journal entries. I really like the guy that makes a lot of the more positive ones and says like, "Hey, I want to do a good job today. I want to come back. I want to see my friends online. I want to go to this group. I want to talk to people. I want to be here." It's like you said. If you can look back on that and say, "Yeah, that was a rough point, but now you're past that," then you're doing better already.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And honestly, I just want to give a shout out to like, my friends that helped me along that journey particularly. I'm not gonna name any names or anything, but if I always say if you've made a positive impact on my life this year, I value you a lot and I greatly appreciate you. And I made this like a couple weeks or like a few months ago. I was just telling, one of my friends who, they started doubting everything around them. Like, how am I still friends with you despite being like this miserable? Like how am I still friends to them? And I just say I don't lose my friends. I just don't. Like I can name so many people where I've said, "Hey, you're my close friend," and to this day, even if we haven't talked in years properly, like I still very much value that person and I very much value that bond. And I'm kind of glad I have that sort of platform here to be like, yeah, to all the people that have made a positive contribution to my life and that to the people that I've said, "Hey, I really appreciate you." I just want everyone to know that I still do. Like to this day, even if it's been years since we've last talked, I still strongly value that like interactions we've had and pulling me through that year.
It sounds like spiritual almost, and I mean that as a compliment. Like that's a kind of affection that I feel like not everybody can have nowadays, depending on how they look at things. And so that's something incredible. Just being able to look at somebody, being able to look at another human being, and saying, yeah, like maybe we haven't had some great days, but also just realizing at the end of the day, this is a person I really care about. I don't want to see this person be miserable. I don't want to see this person be down. That's the kind of affection that some people like that everybody, I believe, should strive to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, man. Well, Sonic, I mean, dude, we've hit the hour threshold, so I'm no longer obligated to keep you here. But thank you, dude. Like this has been great talking to you as well. I think this is a another great addition of the podcast, and I'm very thankful to have had you on the show today.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I feel like I was messaging you a bit before about how, I don't know how confident I might or how confident I might be, towards this, whole talk about life kind of thing because I'll be honest, my life is very heavy. I've already mentioned that, but uh, you know, having done that here and just having a nice talk about these really, really, deep and sensitive topics, and it's like I've gotten a lot out of my mind and into the air about, how I handle things and how I overcome my challenges. And yeah, this has been a really great time to do that. So I thank you so much for having me here. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. No, I think it's inspirational a lot of what you've said. For what it's worth as well, I think it's hilarious that everybody I've had on this podcast in the pre-call, everybody has come to me and has said, "Hey, dude, I don't know if I can do this." And then we start getting to the actual talking points and it's inspirational. So yeah, I think that this is the reason why I wanted to start this podcast is just really letting people just like formulate the thoughts and just seeing where they are and kind of reflecting on the place that they are. And because there's a lot of people like understand as well, there are a lot of people that were in the same scenario as us, as you and I were like, man, my life just sucks, I really hate this. And then maybe like this could be their 2022 moment, I don't know how many people to reach. I don't know if some people will just look at the podcast title or will listen to the intro and immediately discard it. But for all those of you who are listening in this point, go give Sonic some support. Like I said, he's an awesome dude. I've absolutely loved knowing him, And I think if you end up talking to the guy at any point, you won't regret it. I think he's an awesome face. And yeah, man, thank you again for coming on to the podcast. I think it's been great.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
the
But
kind
yeah,
words.
with that being said, thank you to Sonic for coming on the show. Shout outs to Ison, by the way, for the Twitch stream for the raid. I didn't say that earlier because we were in the middle of a discussion point, but I hope the talk was comfy. If you guys want to go follow more of Sonic, and I suppose Ison's socials maybe will be linked as a bonus prize. Like, woo, shout outs.
Yeah.
If you guys want to
Shout
go
out to Ice.
shout outs to Ice and SR, man. Go follow this guy's Twitch page as well. He's awesome. I'll put his socials in the description perhaps. But yeah, if you guys want to listen to more of today's guest, Slysonic, his socials will be at the end of the podcast and they will be in the description. Make sure you follow the Life Equation on YouTube and Spotify and stay up to date with the X account and the Discord so that you never miss an episode. And thank you all for being here. Sonic, do you have any closing words?
Just stay awesome. Keep
Yeah,
keep up keep up your positive mind frame, guys. If you're going through something, deep in your life right now, it will get better. It will get better.
we'll get better. Amen to that. Now, take the words, go forth, and until next time, stay awesome, y'all. Take it easy.